Along with the win last night, we saw Chris Paul, one of the leaders of this team, put in a great clutch performance with 41 points to clinch the NBA Finals for the first time in his 16-year, hopefully Hall of Fame career. He punched his ticket to the finals. What does this mean for Chris Paul's legacy as a player? Because he was never able. That was a knock on him. Every team he was at, whether it was the Clippers, the Hornets, or the Houston Rockets, the knock on Chris Paul was always the dude can't win the big one. He can't get over the hump into the finals. What does this win mean for him?
So the win is huge. Obviously, he was going to be a Hall of Famer regardless. Chris Paul was going to go down as one of the top five guards to ever play in the NBA, and that's that's a known fact. What this does is this just lets him add to the resume. There's a lot of guys who play their entire career and don't win, and Chris Paul, it's very, as much as he gets a lot of hate for the way a lot of things went down in Houston and kind of the way things ended in LA with the Clippers, dude, you have to look at his whole body of work and you just have to ask yourself, um, first off, when he was in New Orleans, dude, he was carrying that team. Like, a lot of people don't remember his first stint in New Orleans, dude. He had that New Orleans at the time Hornets team. They were like the 2 seed in the West, dude. And they took the Spurs, who I think either went to the Western Conference Finals or the Finals that year. They took them like 6 games. They almost beat the team that, I think, if it was '07, they almost beat the team that won the whole thing that year. So Chris Paul, I don't think this just adds to his legacy. Obviously he's a Hall of Famer, dude. The icing on the cake, every player wants to win that championship. And nobody at this point, I don't think anybody wants it more than Chris Paul, considering the fact that a lot of his, maybe Melo might be the only other one that wants it more. But with regards to guys that have, they've paid their dues, they've given so much to the game and everything like that, been a great ambassador to the game and everything too, dude. We're at the point, especially with his career and the way it's gone, all the scrutiny he's undergone. He goes and he wins that championship. That's the icing on the cake. He was already a Hall of Famer, but this just cements him as probably one of the top two guards to ever play the game.
Really? Okay. I don't know if I go that far. Top 2 guards to ever play the game.
Point guard. I'm not.
Point
I'm not going to say.
guards. Okay, I was about
That's
to say,
shooting guard. I'm not going
nah,
to say. I'm not going to
Nani,
go.
like Kobe,
Yeah,
Jordan,
yeah.
Nani, but no,
Point guard.
I get what you're saying. No, Chris Paul. I mean, if we look at the offseason acquisitions from last year, and there were a few to talk about, right? No one meant more. There was no bigger acquisition at the end of the day, like having seen what's transpired over the past year, than Chris Paul. The Suns win the free agency contest for this past offseason just because of what Chris Paul meant. He scored 41. That shows you how hungry this guy is. The knock on him, and that was a big thing in Houston. The big thing in Houston coming out of that whole situation, a lot of people pointed at Chris Paul as the problem. They pointed at Chris Paul as the reason that team didn't do well. When in reality, if you look at it, Chris Paul was the reason Chris Paul not being there in game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. That was one of the big reasons they didn't make it to the finals that year. So in reality, it was Chris Paul who brought them to the dance. It was Chris Paul who would have probably been that edge for them against the Warriors, who, by the way, had just acquired KD at that point. So let's not talk so this whole talk about Chris Paul, well, he was never really that good, or Chris Paul, he was always a really solid, great player, but he was never able to get over the hump. He was just never, I think, in a place where he was afforded that opportunity. The closest he got was Houston, and he ended up getting injured. And if you look at what happened with the Clippers, that team, there was a lot of coaching changes. There were Blake Griffin and him, they played well for the first few years, but they never got into a groove, and Blake never developed into that player. So there were always a lot of different things going on that I don't think people took into account as far as the whole debate about Chris Paul. But what this does prove, and I think what this does do, is silence a lot of the haters. Because Chris Paul, of anyone in the NBA to have haters, I know LeBron has his haters. I know that, even KD has his haters with the snake emojis and whatnot. But
He has a lot of
Chris
haters.
Chris Paul is someone I think who's gotten a lot of hate unjustifiably for a very long time. And what this does is hopefully when he wins, I think they will win. When he wins, it's going to shut those people up, and it's going to, again, elevate him into a status that a lot of people already had him in, but I think in the eyes of everyone, he's going to be elevated, like you said, into one of the greatest players to ever play the game, because he's been one of the greatest players for a very long time, but the attention was never on him. And I think with the attention focused on him in this spotlight, it's going to do wonders for his career. Very similar dynamic, I want to say very quickly. Very similar dynamic to 2011 with Dirk Nowitzki, because everyone knew Dirk was great. Like everyone knew Dirk was great, but he never had that defining moment until 2011 where people really paid attention. We're like, oh my God, this is legitimately one of the best players to ever play the game of basketball. He's not just great; he's like Hall of Fame level, all time great. So I think this is it kind of reminds me of that dynamic a little bit.
Absolutely, dude. That's, I mean, a lot of people point to his playoff, the playoff failures and everything like that, but they forget he's been playing the game for so long. When he came in, dude, he had to carry a franchise. He did the best he could with carrying that Hornets franchise at the time. And then obviously, things did not go as planned, both in Houston and in LA. But look at what he did last season, dude. That Thunder team is picking the lottery this year. And all they did was get rid of him. They eventually sold Steven Adams later on, but it was, think about it, dude. The only offseason departure from that team was Chris Paul. And you saw they took Chris Paul off that team. They go from playoff team, one shot away.
It's one of the worst teams.
The second round to one of the worst teams in the league.
Yep.
So
Chris Paul, arguably the most underrated player probably the past 10 years. So big ups to him. Congratulations to him. Thanks for watching this video from Real Take Sports Talk. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Also remember to check out our live show every single Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on the YouTube channel. And remember, keep it real.